Well, Vice President Joe Biden announces his all-female White House communication team, and the liberal networks are gushing. Listen.
The president-elect staffs up his communications team with history-making hires.
I think that it points to a return, quite frankly, to a move to a more traditional relationship with the press.
It's a historic headline, and it's a very important historic headline.
We've seen a big difference in terms of how President-elect Biden is choosing to make news. It's very traditional, very conventional.
Oh my God. The media spent the past 2 days calling Biden's all-female team historic. That's breaking barriers. I never heard them gush like that over President Trump's mostly female communications team. Right now, every position Biden named is going to be held by a woman, is currently held by a woman in the Trump administration. Go figure. They'll never give this president credit for anything. Joining us now to discuss the media's biased reporting is investigative journalist and best-selling author, Sharyl Attkisson. Sharyl, great to see you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
So, Sharyl, I want to touch first on what I talked about Scott Pelley over at 60 Minutes. You used to work at CBS. They didn't ask the most pressing questions to the guy who's in charge of the whole system. What do you make of that? I call it lies by omission, and this is how they go about their bias in media today. They just don't ask questions that we need answers to.
Well, I agree with your analysis on this that you just published. And that's what I talk about in my book, Slanted, how a lot of times it's the omission, not just what they do say, but what they don't say and what they don't ask. And I think people at home realize that. They recognize, even if they're on that team or on that side, they see when we as journalists are favoring one side so blatantly that we're probably not accurately giving the whole picture. We're giving them the narrative or the spin that we want them to have. And I've spent a great deal of time trying to explain in the things that I've written and the speeches that I've given, how I've traced why this is the way it is and the political and corporate interests that have been able to co-opt the news in such a way that it's not only the narratives that you see and the stories you don't see, but the language we use, the sides we take, the bias we insert, the opinions we give, top to bottom. I really think it's a mess.
You know, there was so much information that Scott Pelley could have asked Krebs about. We saw the wild vote swings that all go to Joe Biden. I'm not saying it's fraud. It may be, it may not be. I don't know. But I would have loved to have heard his answer just as an inquiring mind, and I didn't get it. 60 Minutes to me has just fallen from the sky if it ever was up there in recent history, which I don't think it really has been. But it's a disgrace what that program has become, Sharyl.
Well, it's a strange and obvious departure from what was considered journalism for journalists after a groundbreaking election, historically like no other, and to have no rational journalistic skepticism. Again, as we were told in 2016 that Russia and China tried to interfere and would do so again in 2020. We know for a fact that domestic actors, including some of our government, interfered in politics, including committing crimes, at least one FBI lawyer, possibly more people. And we're to now believe that the press says there's no reason to be skeptical of anything that happened in 2020. And I would like to have asked Krebs, if I were interviewing him, how it could be that with all of these warnings we had, that things were getting worse and worse with possible threats to our elections, that he, I guess, thinks he oversaw the cleanest, most problem-free election in American history with nobody trying to do anything after all of these claims and threats of foreign interference. And after we saw what happened in 2016, we're to believe that there was no reason to ask any questions. And I take your point. This is a common theme with journalists now in the aftermath of 2020 election, that they claim absence of evidence that they think is good enough is somehow evidence that there is no evidence. And that's just silly. You know, any attorney will tell you that at the beginning of a case, the person accusing somebody of something else doesn't have the tools, the subpoena power, the ability to march into a building and collect forensic evidence with machines. They don't have the power, the authority to do such a thing. They need that from the court after they make plausible claims. They don't need all the evidence. They can't possibly have all the evidence at that stage. Or a law enforcement body needs to get involved. And so far, at least publicly, we've seen a very strange lack of interest on the part of law enforcement bodies.
Yeah. It is all very strange when you look at all of the circumstantial surrounding it, all of the abnormalities, all of the historical departures from the norms, that no one seems from law enforcement to getting involved in this. And I think that's why so many people are at home are frustrated. And when the media had a role to go and investigate these things, they're not doing it either because, as you summed it up, they just don't want to through all of this. Sharyl Attkisson, it is great having you on the program. I wish I had more time for you, but thank you. And I want to make sure that everybody knows about your new book. It is called Slanted: How the News Media Taught Us to Love Censorship and Hate Journalism. Well, Sharyl, thank you so much for coming on the program.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.